Welcome to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. I'm your host, Jeannie Hall, and I'm a creative inspiration coach who helps writers reignite their creative sparks. This podcast is here to help you knock down any barriers that stand between you and your dreams. You can do it. Join me. Hello, and welcome to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. This is podcast 40, Integrity. And I want to just announce that in the upcoming 50th episode, which is 10 more down the road, I plan to do kind of a special episode, so please tune in and check that one out. It'll be out. I do 2 a week, so it'll be out basically in 5 weeks' time. So if you like special episodes, tune into that one. It's going to be a good one. So this is episode 40, Integrity. And the reason I'm talking about integrity today is because I was introduced to the idea of kind of a different kind of integrity by one of my teachers. And it was such a different way of looking at it that I just wanted to share it with you guys and get your input on it. It's basically the idea of spiritual integrity. And I find the idea so fascinating. So when I look up just go to Google or Bing or one of the other general sites and just type in to get a definition of the word integrity, I found this: a personal choice to hold oneself to consistent moral and ethical standards. And I just thought that was really a neat way of saying it. I love that they start the definition with a personal choice. Isn't that interesting? Just like the choices we make with our thoughts, feelings, and actions. All things are choices. So spiritual integrity is a similar concept. And the person who introduced me to it was the phenomenal spiritual leader and teacher and coach named Rikka Zimmerman. I think she's phenomenal. If you have not checked her out, go and check her out immediately. She is so special, and she's someone who has survived basically stage 4 cancer that should have been terminal. It really should have been. And through her own spirituality and also medical help, she was able to completely be cured of the cancer within, I believe it was 2 months of her diagnosis. So talk about the power of faith, right? And belief. So she's very special to me as a teacher and mentor. And I've been exploring her take on the idea of spiritual integrity ever since I first heard her talk on a call. She was giving a call that I got to listen to that was basically a group call for people that she was training to be coaches, basically her own brand of life coaching that she does with her coaches. And one of the people she was talking to was a new coach who was having issues with the idea of integrity and honesty. And the client said it was really important to her to feel like she was always telling the truth no matter what, even with her clients, and that she didn't want to lie to anyone, even if that meant saying something that might hurt her client. And she was concerned about losing clients once she had them, because she was basically saying, look, I don't feel comfortable lying. So how do you help someone and still spare their feelings? Apparently she wasn't even comfortable with the concept of little white lies to protect feelings. She really wanted to be super honest, even if that was brutal. And so Rikka gave this client of hers an example from her own life. And Rikka talked about the difficult relationship she'd always had with her own mom, her own mother, because her mother had 5 kids and her mom, hated children. So imagine that. This is a woman who hates children, hates being around children, hates the sound of children, hates being around lots of noise and, excitement and things that children are full of joy, and that kind of stuff just drives her crazy. But she ended up having 5 kids of her own. Then Rikka's dad died when she was a little girl, when she was still very young, and her mother ended up raising all of these children alone. And her mother even said how much she wanted to kill them at times. She said this in the presence of her own kids, how much she wanted to kill them. Okay, so before you freak out, at the notion of any mother hating her children, let me share Rikka's philosophy. Rikka is very special, as I've already said, and she's like many law of attraction teachers in that she believes nothing that happens is a coincidence. And my last podcast kind of talked about there are no coincidences, and that there is a reason for every single thing that happens, both good and bad, in our lives, and that is there to shape us into who we are. And the fact that Rikka's mother had 5 children she hated doesn't necessarily make her mother a bad person. Though I realize some of you are probably going, "What?" when I said that, right? Some of you are disagreeing with me, and that's fine. But we know that their childhoods, no matter what, how good can their childhoods be if they had a mother raising them, a single mother raising them who hated them? You can't imagine that childhood was very good. So it means that Rikka's mother was exactly who she needed to be to make her children who they needed to be. So Rikka's difficult childhood shaped her into the very special person she is now. I'm not saying that it's ever okay for anyone to mistreat or abuse someone else, especially not children. Not ever, ever, ever. But what I'm saying is that Rikka's childhood prepared her into being the person she is today, just like a lot of spiritual leaders and a lot of leaders in general. A lot of the powerful people in our world that are also very good and kind people at the same time, those folks have had hellish stuff in their early lives, a lot of them. Not every one of them, but a whole bunch of them. It'd be interesting to actually find out the actual percentage of people who are successful and who actually used their difficult childhoods to propel them into that success. It'd be actually very interesting to see what the actual percentage is on that. But there's something about the power of people who have suffered abuse and misery early in their lives that tends to make them, sometimes it turns us into victims, but that's a choice we make on how we look at our childhoods. Are we going to choose to be a victim and be victimized our whole life? Or are we going to look at that as a growth experience that we dealt with and we deal with it? And we get help if we need help with it. And then we move past it. And we become stronger people because of it. That which does not kill you, right? So if you allow it to make you stronger and better, it also leaves you being someone who understands. So if you go into some kind of profession like a coach, or you're a leader, or you're a teacher that is basically helping other people and working directly with other people who may have suffered in this way, it automatically enables you to be more compassionate because you've been there. You've felt that. You have suffered like that. You know exactly what that feels like. So people who have suffered often can be some of the teachers that other people who are suffering now and who haven't gotten past it and need help, they are wonderful mentors and teachers and coaches to those people because they can empathize in a real way. And again, I would never condone someone making someone else suffer for any reason. That's just not acceptable ever. But I do believe that those who live through it changes them on a very fundamental level. And because of that, it enables them, it gives them something special. It gives them an edge to understanding other people's plights that are in the same situation or a similar situation in a way that someone who hasn't suffered that, not to say that they can't get help from someone who hasn't suffered, because they can and totally be fine and wonderful and that'll work too. But if you have someone who has been through it themselves and come out the other side, there's something very powerful for that in people. Okay, back to Rikka and her mom. So this was later on when Rikka's an adult and she's at a family gathering with her mom, and her nieces and nephews are all there. Her brothers and sisters are there with their kids. And the nieces and nephews are running around and playing. Okay, they're just exhibiting a lot of joy. And Rikka's mom was sitting off to the side by herself, and she was rubbing her head like she had a headache. And so Rikka goes and approaches her, and she knows her mom, so she knows that these kids playing nearby is probably upsetting her. And so she sits beside her mom and says, "Mom, these kids are driving me crazy." And her mom looked at her with surprise and asked her, "They are?" And Rikka said, "Sometimes, Mom, I just want to kill them." Now, did Rikka actually mean what she was saying to her mom? No. She loved her nieces and nephews, and she saw their playing as an expression of joy, which just brought her joy. But in that moment, she was connecting with her mom in a new way that she'd never connected with her before. And she was letting her mom know that she understood. And she was letting her mom know that she was forgiving her. Rikka was forgiving her mom for hating her own children, for hating her as a child. And here's the thing. I know we tend to look at people who make other people suffer, abusers and people who've done wrong to us. Maybe if it's not that severe, maybe it's not someone who's abused us or mistreated us, but maybe someone who's hurt us in some way. And even if it's just emotionally, maybe they broke our heart, or maybe they said something nasty at one point and it really hurt us. Here's the thing. Anyone who does that, imagine what they do to themselves. Because if you're like Rikka's mom and you hate your own daughters and sons that came from your body, how could you possibly feel about yourself? It couldn't be positive. It couldn't be. She must have loathed herself, right? And at that moment, when Rikka said, "I just want to kill him," right? And she was just doing that so that she could connect with her mom in a real way. And she was just doing that so that her mom and her could really understand each other. And it totally changed her mom in that moment. And her mom tells Rikka, "I thought I was the only one who had ever felt that way." Imagine the burden of that. Imagine that you just feel that way, that you hate kids. There's a lot of people out there who don't have kids and don't want them because they can't stand being around them. It drives them crazy. All that exuberance and noise and rambunctiousness, it just grates on their nerves and they can't stand it. And doesn't mean they want them dead or anything, but they don't want them around them because it annoys them. They don't like that kind of behavior. They'd much rather be around adults and be in a quiet room or something. And that's fine to feel that way. But imagine being that kind of person and then having 5 kids of your own for whatever reason, and then being saddled with them as the single parent raising them. Imagine what that would do to you as a person. And those of you who are parents, has there ever been a time when you could honestly say you kind of hated your kids, even if only for a second? Have your kids ever driven you up the wall to the point where you just wanted to leave them behind? Leave them in the house and walk out, or leave them at the park and drive away? Or lock yourself in a closet away from them? If you've never been there with your kids like that and you're a parent, that's cool. That's awesome. But if you have felt that way, that's okay too. There are some things that we face in life that are so difficult for us that we really have trouble coping, especially in the moment, because sometimes we get overwhelmed by our frustrations. And since parenting is probably the hardest job there is, it's understandable that these sorts of negative feelings might bubble up on occasion. And I had my favorite professor in college was the adoptive parent of 15 special needs kids herself. And these kids in particular are a challenge sometimes to raise. They require extra help. They require more time. They require more patience. And if you're a parent of a special needs kid in particular, you have to allow yourself to feel the way you feel. And that's integrity too, right? Being honest with how you really feel, being stressed out with your kids. And maybe your kids aren't special needs and you still feel like you hate them sometimes, right? That's okay to feel that way. Forgive yourself for that. That's just being human. It doesn't ever mean you're going to act on it, but realize that those feelings are normal under certain circumstances. And as a former teacher myself, who had a high number of special needs kids in my classroom, they were integrated and mainstreamed, but a lot of the time the special ed teacher that was supposed to be with them was not there. They get called away a lot, and even though that's the law, that's what's required, they get left in those classrooms all the time with just the English or math teacher. And I was an English teacher, so I had huge classrooms full of 33 kids, and a full third of them would be what we call SPED, or special education students that had special needs. And it can be extremely difficult to deal with that situation. So I can empathize on that level. So when you treat yourself and others with compassion in those circumstances, being honest with the way you really feel about it, you are totally and absolutely exhibiting integrity on a spiritual level. Because you are being true to your feelings, and you are being what that other person you're helping needs you to be. That's what Rikka was doing with her mom. She was being the person that her mom needed her to be in that moment, even if she didn't actually hate her nieces and nephews at all. Her mom needed her to say that, so she did. And in that moment, she said she really felt that between her and her mom, that understanding. And anybody who is a coach who helps other people, or a counselor, or any profession that helps other people that are struggling with something, they need to be able to make their clients feel completely safe when they are sharing those struggles. And if that means fully empathizing and sympathizing with them, that is still showing integrity. So I personally find the idea of spiritual integrity fascinating. And if you are able to exhibit spiritual integrity in all that you do and in every relationship you have too, your own sense of understanding and compassion increases exponentially if you can put yourself on the same level as someone else. It's amazing the difference it makes in your relationship. So being authentic to who you really are may be less about facts and more about allowing your emotions to help you help someone else who is struggling in their lives. And I really do believe this is part of being authentic in general, being true to who you are on a spiritual level, because that's really who you are anyway. And if you go through life, and I've been one of these people in the past, and I'm working on this. If you go through life as a people pleaser and you try and be what you think they want you to be, and you try not to rock the boat, and you try to not upset anybody or say anything controversial or be any way other than you think they want you to be, which is impossible, by the way. We can't be what they want us to be because we don't know what they want us to be. And they don't get to determine who we are anyway or how we behave. So that's crazy. But a lot of us go through life trying so hard to please other people in our lives, to please our parents, to please our boss, our spouses, our significant others, our children even, family members, friends, church members. We try and present ourselves in a certain way to those people, and it's not actually who we are. It's who we think they think we need to be. But the thing is, if you keep doing that, you're much less likely in the long run to be happy. Why? Because you're so focused on them and what they think that you lose track of what you think of yourself, and that's really all that matters. And like I said, the truth is, you can't control what other people think of you anyway, so why try? Why don't you just be you and see what happens? That's integrity too. Because the truth of the matter is, you can be the most wonderful person in the world and still have someone say they don't like you. And that's okay. And being able to accept that is another part of being spiritually enlightened and finding peace with that. And let me give you an example from life coach Brooke Castillo. She loves to talk about this example of a peach, the fruit. That you can be the most beautiful, juiciest, plumpest peach imaginable. But there are people in the world who will just never like peaches. And that's okay. Because you're your own person. You're your own peach. And there's always going to be people who don't like peaches. But those aren't your people anyway. So don't worry about them. Right? Be your peach, right? Understanding that there's going to be people out there who don't like peaches. There are going to be people that prefer something else. And maybe they prefer someone other than you. That's okay. Those aren't your people. That's not your audience. That's not your friend group. That's not who you need to connect with anyway. You're not going to help those people. And that's okay. So you don't have to try. Just keep looking for the other people who do love the juiciest, plumpest, most beautiful peaches. Because that's your people. That's who you need to connect with. And just because someone doesn't like you, it's not a judgment against you. It's just that everyone has preferences. And as long as you're being authentic, you're showing your spiritual integrity, and you're much, much more likely to be happy in your life. So what do you think of this concept overall? Do you agree that having this kind of integrity is just as important as being brutally honest sometimes? Let's discuss it in the comments. And guys, please do me a favor. If you've been listening to my podcasts for a while and you've been enjoying them, please do me a quick favor and go take a moment. It's easiest if you go on your phone and go give me a review if you would. That would be so awesome. Even if it's just to say hi, because the reviews will help my show and I really, really, really would appreciate that. So just take a moment if you would and go on your phone and go into the podcast app and put a little review under Writing in Your Jammies. I sure would appreciate it, especially if you're enjoying this content. All right, guys, have a wonderful, beautiful day, week, month, and year. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to the Writing in Your Jammies podcast. I appreciate every download and every person who has subscribed. I release new episodes every Wednesday and Saturday, so if you enjoy this content, please consider leaving a review. The more reviews fledgling shows like mine receive, the more visible it becomes on the various podcast stations. Each review helps, so if you enjoy what I've been sharing, please help others find this show by leaving a brief review. Thanks again for listening.